Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Property Doctor podcast with me, your host, Dr. Andrew Threadgold. This week I'm talking to Jonathan Jay, the business buying and mergers and acquisition expert. I've been a big fan of Jonathan's stuff on YouTube for quite a while and I've watched him for a number of years, so much so that I finally took the plunge and signed up to his business buying mentorship, which is how I've been getting the knowledge to do the stuff that I'm doing with my own business acquisition journey. He's a great speaker, is Jonathan, and he's got a lot of knowledge and an awful lot to offer. So I'm hoping that it comes across in this podcast episode. He talks about a few things that I've not seen him mention in his own stuff, such as his very first deal and his kind of training business that he does very well with. But nevertheless, he'll talk all about it in this episode. My own stuff is progressing quite nicely. The deals that I've got going on are progressing quite nicely too. I've got one that's fallen out of bed, but another two that have replaced it. So nothing is signed, sealed, and completed yet. But there's definitely one or two, and maybe another 5 or 6 that are looking like they could well, join my little group. So hopefully you'll get some value from this episode. Hopefully you'll see what I see, in that, you can buy businesses from any background. You don't necessarily need to be involved in the sector to be able to do it. And hopefully you get some value, like I say. Anyway, that's enough from me. I'm going to carry on with my walk. Trying out a new bit of kit here. This is called a gimbal. It's got my phone on it and it's supposed to make you seasick if you're watching it on a big telly. Anyway, that's enough from me. Take care for now. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of the Property Doctor podcast with me, your host, Dr. Andrew Threadgold. This week, we've yet another amazing entrepreneurial figure. Hot off the heels of James Sinclair the other week, we now have one of my all-time favourite YouTubers and entrepreneurial people, Jonathan Jay. Most of you, I'm sure, will follow Jonathan's stuff on YouTube and his podcast, which is very successful, but I'm absolutely delighted that he's agreed to come on and speak to me this morning. How are you doing, Jonathan?
I'm great. Great to be here, Andrew. Thank you for the invitation.
No, thanks for coming on. I've been looking forward to this for weeks.
Wonderful.
So, a declaration of interest. I'm a fully paid up member of Jonathan's stuff. I've followed him for a long time, and Jonathan's content and education is helping me buy businesses at the moment. So, before, get that out there up front, but how did Jonathan Jay become the person that he is today? How did you end up in the mergers and acquisitions world?
Well, mergers and acquisitions, business in general, something that I always wanted to do. I mean, even as a teenager, I was always dreaming up little businesses, and went to the school head teacher and proposed the idea of a tuck shop, which they never had before. And I left the class before morning break 5 minutes early every day to get all the boxes of crisps out of the cupboard and set up the table in the playground. So so I guess that sort of entrepreneurial thing was always there. I dropped out of university at 19, which I'm not saying that because I'm particularly proud of it, but because I've never actually regretted it. I've never had to do something that required a degree. I've always been my own boss. I've never worked for anyone else. But I've employed plenty of people with degrees, just not gone down that road myself. And yeah, I dropped out of university to be in business, and it didn't really matter to me so much what the business did. That was the thing. It was the business concept was of interest to me. It wasn't that I had to have a business doing a certain thing. That was never the driving factor. And I applied the same rule I suppose to business acquisitions, in that many of my clients want to buy a business. It doesn't really matter to them what the business does. They just want to have the benefits of business ownership, and the biggest benefit obviously being profit and the capital growth of the business. So I've been around this for a long time, and I'm 50, nearly 52. So it's been my entire adult life.
Wow. So when you dropped out of uni, did you have a business to go into? Did you start
Not
your own?
particularly, no.
Right.
I spent a
You
few
weren't
years
selling
in the
crisps in the playground then?
yeah, that I was in London, so that wouldn't have really scratched the surface in terms of personal overhead. I was probably not as I didn't have as much direction. With the benefit of hindsight, I should have had more direction. I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have someone who'd been there before me who could say, avoid this, do this, save yourself a lot of time by not doing that. I didn't have that person. And that's another one of the reasons now where I just see it's so beneficial to people, because you can shortcut a process by years by someone saying, come on, right, let's get this sorted. What's the plan? These are the 3 things that you need to do. Go off and do them. And you can save years of your life. And in your 20s, maybe you don't sort of think that way, but when you cross those landmark birthdays of 40, 50, you start to think, well, actually, I wouldn't mind a few more years.
Yeah.
I wish I had more direction back then. And I was reading Richard Branson's first biography, which came out in 1996, and I was reading it on the beach in Ibiza, and I was lying there on the beach in 1996, and I've still got in the bookshelves behind me, I've still got that original edition that I read back then. It still has sand between the pages, and I was so inspired by that, because I thought, this guy's got a real business. This is a business that works when you are not there. And that's always the definition, isn't it? If the business works when you're not there, then that's a business rather than a job or a sort of self-employed type business, lifestyle business. So I came back to the UK and I said, right, I am going to create a proper business. So I thought about all the things that I had some concept of, some knowledge of. And I'd always been very interested in publishing, interested in books, I was always buying magazines. This was pre anything online, of course. This is 1996. And I thought, you know what? Why don't I publish a magazine? And I went through several different topics. I say we, because it was my brother. My brother did part of this early journey with me. And we even we published on behalf of an airline company, an airline magazine, right. Where people was or an airplane magazine, I should say, where people were buying and selling airplanes. I don't know anything about airplanes, but there were lots of airplanes advertised in this magazine. Right. And then I fell into something that was a personal interest, that was personal development. So I was a big fan of Brian Tracy and Zig Ziglar, and I had the cassette tapes, and I used to buy the cassette tapes from Nightingale Conant. I don't know whether you recall yeah. Nightingale Conant days. And I would listen to these cassette tapes, and I got actually a Tony Robbins book for my 18th birthday. And there was one sentence in that I've never forgotten, which is, you can be who you want to be. Your life is under your control. You're not your destiny is not preordained. You're in control of your future. So I started interviewing people for this personal development magazine, which was a great benefit, because I was interviewing people, getting the benefit of those interviews as well as publishing them in the magazine. Now, right. As a business, I have to say, probably wasn't the world's best business. It made a bit of money one month. It made a bit of a loss the next month. I was in the office 6 days a week. I mean, it was hard work. If you're publishing a monthly magazine, that month comes around so fast, so fast. And then someone came along and wanted to buy it.
It wasn't Felix Dennis, was it?
No, it wasn't. No, not. It's interesting you should say that name, because I was away last week for a few days, and I was looking for a book to take with me. And one of the books I took out of the bookshelf is actually still on the table, just 2 meters from here, is Felix Dennis's book. I thought, I need to reread that book. I remember
Fabulous book. I
a
love
good
it.
read. Yeah, an amazing book, absolutely. And I've got the hardback edition, and inside the front cover there are reproductions, photographs of the checks that he has sent to HMRC over the years. 3.4 million pounds.
Wow.
17.7 million pounds. So the guy was making some serious money, unlike me, because I was just scraping by. So when this company came along with the interest of buying me, they were called Marcus Bond Associates. I don't think they exist anymore. It was a training and adult education business. And they wanted to own the personal development title, mostly, I think, because of the database, because of my subscribers, the inquiries, and so forth. So we did a deal relatively quickly, and I sold the business in 1999, just at the tail end of 1999. And it was a real eye-opener because I made more money the day I sold it than I'd ever made in all the years of owning it. I mean, it was just incredible. And you'd think that the penny would drop instantly. That's the way to go. But I sometimes have to hear things a few times before the penny drops. So I started another business, and that was actually in adult education, inspired by the readers of my personal development magazine. I went along to an exhibition and to promote the magazine. And it was one of those exhibitions where sometimes there are more people exhibiting than there are visitors. It was very quiet, very quiet.
It's a hard gig, that, isn't it?
Oh yeah, standing there for 3 days trying to engage those poor people who were being jumped on by everyone.
Yeah.
But opposite me, there was an American company represented called Coach University, and there were the British clients of this Coach University. So you spend a lot of time talking to the people on the other stands. And there's one particular chap in particular I was talking to, and I said, "So this training course that you did, why did you do it in America? Why didn't you just do it here in the UK?" And he said, "Because no one does it here in the UK." And I'm looking at him, I can actually still, even though this was 24 years ago, I can imagine this conversation in my head is so clear. I can picture it exactly where we were standing. He was standing here to my right. And he said, no one does it in the UK. And I remember looking at him, and the penny dropped at that point. I thought, well, maybe I should do something in the UK. But I didn't know anything really about coaching and mentoring and that sort of, I didn't know. But I had the contributors to the magazine. I still knew them. So I phoned some of them up and I said, "Do you know anything about running a training program on coaching and mentoring?" And they said, "Oh, yeah, we do that informally, or we've done this for companies." And I said, "Okay, right. If I got you guys together for the weekend and I went out and found the customers, could you put on an amazing training program for everyone?" And they said, "Well, absolutely, we could." And I said, "Well, how much would you charge me?" And they said, "Oh, we won't charge you anything, Jonathan. We'll do it as a favor." To be fair, that generosity of spirit changed quite quickly. But fair enough. I mean, yeah, it got me off to a good start.
Yeah, it got the ball rolling.
Yeah, absolutely. So I went to people that I knew and said, "We're running this training course," and the phone didn't stop ringing.
Really? Well,
now what I should explain at this point was, despite the fact that I sold the magazine business for real money, real cash money, I'd actually been dragging around a little bit of debt, credit cards, well, mostly credit cards, really. I think there was a small business loan in there. There was a loan on my car, and my car had broken beyond repair, but I still had this loan to pay off. That was horrible. And I was also 3 months in arrears with my mortgage.
right.
Now, anyone who's ever been 3 months, that's a serious. And I got the notice from Barclays Bank that they were going to repossess. Okay, and it was scary. It was the scariest time of my life because it felt like I was going to lose everything.
Yeah.
And then I ran this weekend training course. I think it was something like the 16th and 17th of October, 1999. And the the fees that people paid for that weekend course, I thought it'd be like 10 people. It was actually 27 people. It changed everything financially. It was just remarkable. And I remember phoning up the car company and say the car loan company and saying, if I pay off the loan today, what is the amount? They told me the amount. For some reason, I went physically to the bank. You wouldn't do that these days, but for some reason, I went to the bank, and I paid it off. I was in a taxi going home. I phoned my girlfriend and I said, "I've done it. I've paid off the car," and it changed everything.
That was a weight off the shoulders, wasn't it?
Yeah. So suddenly, I was. It was. I wasn't. I didn't have money coming out of my ears, but it sometimes all it takes is a few things to change everything. And I thought that was a one-off training course. I thought, okay, I've done it. Great. What's next? But people kept phoning and saying, where's the next one? And that company has been running those training courses every single week, every single month for 24 years. Still going strong, several changes of management. So for nearly a quarter of a century, that company that set up in 1999 has been running those courses. It was a great product. Great company.
Do you still own it? Do you still own that company?
No, I sold that in 2007. That was my first private equity deal.
Right. Okay. So recurring revenue, nice client base.
Not massively recurring revenue, but it was surprisingly predictable because we were the market leader.
Right.
And in 2006, a year before I sold it, I bought my main competitor, which was a multi-million-pound revenue competitor, spawned from my own team. Someone left me, went
The
to
swine.
Oh yeah, well, all the stories I could tell you. I was convinced that they'd stolen the database because they were contacting all my customers. Convinced they'd stolen it. I had no proof. Couldn't prove it. And when I bought that business in 2006, one of the first things I did, and this was pre-cloud, remember, I disconnected the server and went and locked it in my car boot so no one could get their hands on what was on the server.
Because that's safe.
Exactly. I said to my colleagues, Chris and Joe, I said, right, there's the car keys. Go and lock it in the boot so no one can touch it. But I found on that server my database. So my slightly paranoid suspicions that they stole my database, I opened up the server and there it was. They hadn't even renamed it, which was very courageous of them.
Wow. So with that particular business, you weren't the front of it, were you? Because I know you as the front of the training that you do, but with that,
no, I wasn't. So it was run as a, in inverted commas, proper business, in that the majority of customers, clients, they didn't know me, had never spoken to me. On that very, very first training course in October, the one that changed everything for me, I was so nervous about whether the people in the training room would enjoy it, get value from it. I was so nervous. The days leading up to this, I developed mouth ulcers, which is always my sign that I'm run down and I'm stressed. That's always my stress indicator. If I get a little mouth ulcer, I've got stress. And I had awful mouth ulcers. And I actually sat in the hotel reception just outside the training room. I didn't even go in. And people came out at the first coffee break and they were laughing and chatting, smiling. And I thought, oh my goodness. And then everyone ignored me. They didn't know who I was. Everyone ignored me. And it was like, oh my goodness, this is absolutely incredible. Yeah. And at the very end of those 2 days, one of my colleagues, one of the trainers, came out and said, Jonathan, just come in and say hello to everyone. And I thought, oh, I don't want to do this. I was so because we were talking about credibility, weren't we, before we started filming? I thought, I don't know anything about this coaching. And now, to be fair, over the years, I picked up quite a lot. I learned on the job. But it was wonderful. And it just goes to show sometimes how one chance conversation with someone can change the course of your life.
Yeah, that's I've followed a lot of your stuff and I've never heard that story before. And it's interesting that even someone like yourself, I say even someone like yourself, but someone that's, at the front of business acquisition and all the rest of it, had real hardship, financial hardship. And oftentimes in property, in business, it's thrown at people that you're selling things for people to hang their dreams on and all the rest of it, which, when you've been where you've been, it shows that actually that's not the case, because you walk the talk. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, sure. And yeah, I would come home and have all those final demand letters. You can always tell, because if you peek under the window of the envelope, you can see the red ink. And when someone sends you a letter with red ink on the front, it's not good. It's never good news.
No, it's never
I would
good.
just stuff them in the kitchen drawer. I mean, I was burying my head in the sand because I did not have a solution. I had a videotape, a VHS videotape of Brian Tracy speaking at an event in Birmingham that I'd gone along to with the magazine. And I watched this videotape again and again and again. I thought, the answer's in here. The answer's in here. I know I can do this. I know I can. I have no evidence. I've got no evidence whatsoever. But I know that I am better than the situation that I find myself in. The situation does not define me.
Absolutely. And so from that marketing business, which I suppose, or the training business, sorry, from that training business and then onwards, you must have had some significant lessons that you've needed to learn in that time about, business, maybe ethics, the ethics of people. You've mentioned there that the server,
my database,
yeah, the database got nicked. And then a lot of the things that, when I think about business acquisition, I'm concerned about what can go wrong. So yes. In your experience of helping others and through your own experience, have you had any significant issues with business buying and business in general?
I mean, business, just business in general, is unpredictable. I mean, no one saw a pandemic. I mean, who would have thought, if you were writing down all the list of all the things that could go wrong with this business, and you say, okay, right, well, I guess our premises could be flooded by a burst water main outside, and we'd have to close the shop. All right. So that's a risk that you can kind of imagine that could happen. But no one wrote down pandemic. The entire world closes down. I mean, no one. So there's always unpredictability. So that's how you hedge against that unpredictability, and how you limit your exposure and limit your risk. And as you know, on the course, I talk a lot about how to minimize that risk via using the correct corporate structure, getting that corporate structure right. Not using your own cash in a deal, not overpaying for it, because if you overpay for it, it could take you years to kind of catch up, if you like. Limiting your risk with different acquisition structures like earnouts, where it's not a one-sided risk where the seller goes off into the sunset with all the money and you're left holding the baby and trying to figure out how to stop the baby from crying.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think de-risking is really important. I mean, business startup is also fraught with risk as well. I mean, most business startups fail.
Yeah,
they don't make money, especially not in the first few years. You put money in rather than take money out. And that's not the idea of a business. A business is something you should take money out of, not something you put money into. And there are so many things that can go wrong with starting a business. So if you were to have a choice, buying an existing profitable business that already makes money, already has an office, already has staff, already has a website and a business name, and already has customers, and more important than anything, already has cash flow. You put all those things together, why would you not want to buy a business rather than start something from scratch? Now, I absolutely get the entrepreneurial dream. You've got an idea for a better donut. Let's start this donut shop selling these incredible donuts.
I know someone who's done that, but anyway.
Oh, really? You know something? I texted a friend the other day and I said, I've spotted the new trend. It for several years, it was cupcakes, wasn't it? These incredibly elaborate cupcakes. And now it's donuts. Where was I? I was somewhere abroad. Where was I? Maybe it was in Dubai, and I saw these incredible donuts, these decorated donuts. And I thought, aha, it's no longer cupcakes, it's now donuts.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can understand someone having the dream to sort of to have the, you know, the ultimate donut. I get that, absolutely get that. But as you know, Andrew, yeah, our client base is probably people who have done that sort of entrepreneurial, starting something from scratch, realized how hard and risky it is, and now a business that makes things out of steel, a steel manufacturing business, steel fabrication business, may not have been on their wish list when they were a teenager, but actually makes an awful lot of sense if it makes £1 million a year and has been running like that for the past 15 years and will continue to run like that. So and you can do it without any of your own money. So when you put all those things together, the entrepreneurial dream seems almost a little bit idealistic. Why not be in business and secure your family's future rather than taking a punt on something that may not work?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now then, I'm really sorry to interrupt your video, but if you're watching this video, it's possible that you've stumbled across it because you're looking at ways to sell your business. And if that's the case, then I'd be more than happy to speak to you. You can quite happily get in touch with me on andrew@cornerplotsproperties.com. I'll put the email address down there somewhere on the screen so you can see it. Doesn't matter what your business is, doesn't matter what the sector is, I'm interested in speaking to you. As long as it's profitable and it's got a management team in place, which usually means it turns over heading towards £1 million or more, then I'm very interested in speaking to you. Anyway, sorry for the interruption, on with the show.
And through my conversations, I've had quite a lot of conversations with people responding to my inquiries over the past couple of months. And one thing that strikes me is that just like that, nobody ever thinks about buying a business. Everybody only thinks about starting one. And all the business owners, bar one that I've spoken to over the past couple of months, have founded a business, run it all the way through, got past that really important first 5 years where most businesses fail, have run it for 30 years or whatever, and they've come to the end and they need to sell it. But none of them have ever sold a business before. So when you come in with some knowledge, you can help them through the process.
Yes.
And it's actually quite interesting to see their level of knowledge about business when they've been encased in their own business for all those years.
Yes. Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, it's a shortcut. It's a huge shortcut. And of course, yeah, when you start a business, you start one business. No one says, okay, I'm going to start 3 businesses this year. I guess some people might do, but it never happens. In reality, you can't do that successfully, but you can go and buy 3 businesses in a year. And you can buy 3 businesses doing millions of pounds of revenue each in a year. You know, getting past that 1 million threshold of revenue is a big threshold for businesses. Once you've broken through it, I mean, my bank manager years ago used to say to me, this was when bank managers actually had a sense of humor and actually sat down with you, had a coffee with you, and you had their mobile phone number and you could text them. So Tony said to me, he said the first million is the hardest, Jonathan. He said, I've seen it all the time with my customers. First million is the hardest. Once you've done the first million, you know you can do it. You nothing to stop you from that. So it's a mental barrier. But you can go and buy a business, and you'll know the people in the group who've bought multi-million revenue businesses as their first acquisition. And some of them weren't even working. They were unemployed at the point of that first acquisition. Yeah. So anyone can do this if you've got the drive to succeed and are willing to put in the effort to make it work. Plus, you've got the knowledge to do it. You've got to have the knowledge. If you make it up as you go along, I just think that's such a hard road. A little bit like when I was back in my 20s and I was trying to make up business as I went along, and no one said to me, right, Jonathan, this is what you need to do. And I wish someone had been there to do that for me.
Yeah, agree. Just from my experience so far. And there's a lot of mental, for me personally, there was an awful lot of mental switching that needed to happen, because why would somebody sell anything to me? What do I know? Where would I generate the funds? But then when you actually speak to these people, once you know how to do that and you give yourself, you generate the confidence to go out and do it, when you speak to these people, the first conversations, they're usually quite closed and quite reticent, and you know, if the money's right and all the rest of it. But once you get past that first, and you develop a bit of rapport, you find it's not necessarily about the money. It's, are you going to keep the name? Will you keep my staff? It's those kind of things that people are more concerned about, because they've had Jeanette in accounts and they've been through her 3 children. You know,
yes, it's a family. They see it as a family as much as it is a business. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and they're bothered about looking after the thing that they've nurtured. So when you come along and say, actually, do you know what? I have no inclination of changing this. In fact, that's what I want to buy. That's the value, so that I don't need to be there. The kind of things, like the guard goes down a bit. But I tell you what really is difficult, Jonathan: business brokers.
Absolutely.
When you've
Everyone thinks it's the easy route, and it isn't.
When you've had a conversation with an owner that's got a business through a broker, and they've got very different expectations, haven't they?
Yeah, so you've got to understand. So business brokers are like the real estate agents for business, and the one thing we all want to know when we put our house up for sale is how much are we going to get for it. And we go on to Rightmove and we look at what the house down the street sold for, and we feel as though we've got a pretty good sense of what our house is worth. And when we look at a business, though, we don't really know what our business is worth, because you can't go on to the equivalent of Rightmove to find a pretty much identical business. And privately owned businesses, the deal is not advertised. You know, no one knows what's in that contract, and it's designed to be confidential. So we have to go to a professional to do this, and the professional is the business broker. And the business broker knows that the burning question in your mind is, how much can I sell my business for? So if they were totally realistic with you and said, well, look, 8 out of 10 businesses don't sell. You're going to have high aspirations and dreams for the value of your business, but in a year's time, those aspirations and dreams would be smashed because it'd still be on the market. You'll hear no more times than you hear yes. And probably, if we're lucky, we could get you a couple of 100,000. Who's going to sign a contract with that broker? No one. So the broker has to go along and say, well, we've got an amazing business here. We've got a queue of people lining up to buy this sort of business. And easily 7 figures. 7 figures. This is a 7-figure business. Absolutely. $1 million plus. And therefore the broker gets the contract signed. Now, the person who gets the contract signed with the owner of the business is a very different person to the person who sits in the office talking to potential buyers. So I've had a conversation with a pretty decent sized business brokerage where the person sitting on the phone says, oh, the guys who go out and get the instructions from clients, they always build it up, and then it lands on our desk and we go, there's no way we can get £1 million for this business. We're only going to have a disappointed client. But the person who went out to get the instruction, the salesperson, has got the sale, banked the commission, and moved on to the next person.
Yeah.
So it's broken. It's a broken system. So what we always recommend is that you go directly to the owner, an owner who hasn't signed with a broker. You get a far more realistic concept of value. You can have a conversation without a 22-year-old kicking their client under the desk saying, shut up. You can understand. You may have seen this.
I've got one this afternoon.
Oh, really? You can understand the motivations of the seller, where the broker will go, no. They're selling because of retirement. Where what you really want to understand, it's not just retirement, it's stress. Yeah. They promised their wife they're going to retire before the 31st of August. They've got a time pressure on them to do this. And the broker won't let them say those things to you. They'll intervene. And it's therefore very challenging. What we need to do is we need to find people who've been thinking about selling their business, but haven't yet put it on the market for sale. That's the sweet spot that we're looking for.
Yeah, I've got 2 actually that. It's funny, isn't it? I went to someone's house. Went to a business owner's house the other week to agree verbal kind of heads of terms. I should have got them signed, but the other party wasn't there. But anyway, it's all sorted. And he said, I said, why did you reply to me? And he said, well, we spoke about quitting, selling, and we've always had letters, but that day after we'd spoken about it, yours landed on the mat. So we thought, well, we'll give you a ring, and then there it is. And when I went to see him, he opened his drawer, and it was kind of overflowed with letters that they'd been saving for a rainy day. So a lot of it's timing as well.
Timing, yeah, absolutely. So much in life is about timing, isn't it? It's about getting in at the right time, getting out at the right time, right place, right time, all of these things. And the way, you might think, well, timing, well, how can you get your timing right? And it's completely unpredictable. The way to get the timing right is to be trying all of the time. Mm-hmm. Yeah, not just trying once and giving up because the timing wasn't right. It's being persistent. Persistence gets you the results.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is a little bit of a cost involved, but ultimately, if you get one over the line, then it pales into insignificance. So you've got to get away from the small-mindedness about it, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, people say, I want to buy this business. I want a multi-million revenue business. I want it making at least 4, 5, 6, 7, 800,000 a year. Well, spend a few £100 on stamps to send letters to business owners. It's like, so you can't, you're not going to hit the multi-million-pound jackpot by doing nothing. You've got to do stuff. If you just don't have any cash whatsoever, you can go networking. It's a lot more legwork. And you just end up buying coffees rather than stamps. It will get you there eventually.
Yeah, I'm conscious of time, so I've got a couple of things that have just come to my mind whilst we were chatting there. And so for people that are listening, there's a lot of people who are always on the fence. Oh, I'd love to do business buying, and they never actually pull the trigger and get involved. So what kind of things should someone be looking at in a business to acquire?
Cash
as
flow.
as a new deal maker.
Yeah, cash flow more than profit. So you can have a set of accounts that have rosy profit figures on the accounts, but the cash flow of the business can be terrible. And what you're buying it for is cash flow, because the cash flow is the money. The free cash flow is the money that's left over at the end of every month. So after you paid everything, what's left over, because that's the money you can draw out of the company. And that's what you're interested in. If it's a business that constantly runs in its overdraft and it's profitable on paper, and you can be very profitable on paper, but in reality, it can be an absolute cash flow nightmare, then you've got yourself a problem. So cash flow is number one. That is definitely number one. Number two is a business that operates when the owner of the business isn't there, because you do not want to be there as the new owner. You don't want a business where you have to turn up to every day, because that then becomes a job rather than a business. You get sucked into the day-to-day stuff, and that's where the stress happens, when you're sucked into operational day-to-day. And usually people who get into buying businesses, people who own businesses, are good problem solvers. So as soon as you've solved a problem for your new staff in this new acquisition, they will then see you as the number one chief problem solver, which means that they'll come to you with every single problem, which means that they'll stop thinking for themselves, which means that you now have an unofficial job in this business, solving everyone's problems for them. And again, that's counterproductive. That's the opposite of what we want. What we want is a business that we can be the CEO of. We can have a board meeting with the people who run the business. I mean, it might be a board meeting with 2 people. It might be a board meeting with 10 people. And we can set the goals for the business's future success. And then we can let everyone go off and make that happen. And, I'm someone who can get too involved because I care. And I think about it too much sometimes. And I'm very, I'm aware of my own failings. I'm not a guru or a sort of the person who's perfect with everything. Absolutely not at all. And I know that I can get dragged into operations because I am actually a good problem solver. and I think I can solve problems better than anyone else. I'm sure I can't, but I think I can. So I go into solve the problems, and before I know it, I've got everyone's problems in my head.
Yeah.
And that's when you get that feeling of, well, stress, overwhelm, whatever you want to call it. So I always say to people, make sure that the business is sufficiently large to have a management team that can run it, so that it runs and you do not have to be there. Because as soon as you're there, you cross a line into a job rather than business ownership.
Okay. So cash flow, management team in place. Is it important for a business to have its own assets, or is that not something that?
Well, I mean, if you're looking for an ideal business has an asset value similar to, maybe more than, the price that you paid for the business. I'll give you an example. So Jay was on my mastermind program in 2018, lost touch over the years, and he reappeared in January of this year, and he joined my Inner Circle group, which is just for people who bought businesses. And he told me about the deal that qualified him to come into the Inner Circle group. So steel fabrication. He was on my mind when I mentioned steel fabrication. Right. Up in the north of England. He lives in Spain half of the year, in the winter in Spain. His business was a digital marketing business, couldn't be further apart from a steel fabrication business. He paid £2.7 million for this business, turning over 20 million and making 1 million of profit.
Wow.
So 1 million of profit, paying 2.7 million pounds. Oh, by the way, he didn't write a check for he didn't have 2.7 million pounds to write. So he structured it in the way that you now obviously understand.
Yep.
Being on the. And I saw him a couple of weeks ago. I said, how's business? He said, business is great. He said, we've already got so he bought this business last year. We've gone from 20 million revenue to 28 million revenue, just natural organic growth. And he said, just by basically removing the previous owner who's holding things back and empowering the management team to go out and win contracts and get busy. But often retiring owners don't want their business to be busy. You know, they're happy for it just to tick over. So there's often there's a tiger in the tank, if you remember that.
We've got old Boris.
Yeah, there's a tiger in the tank waiting to be released. And what happens is that when it's released, the business just surges forward. And he said, we've got winning another contract that takes up to 30 million. The profit margin's also increased. So even if the profit margin stayed the same, that's 1.5 million of annual profits. But here's the best bit. I've saved the best bit to last. The best bit is the business owns the factory. He's had the factory valued, and the factory valuation came in at 3.4 million pounds. More than what he's paid for the business. He's got a 3.4 million pound asset. So for people who want to build a commercial property portfolio, it's an incredible opportunity to buy a business with a property, peel out the property from the trading company and build your property portfolio on the side. And it's a strategy we talk about a lot.
Yeah, absolutely love the property element to it, obviously, with what I do. So some fabulous tips there for things to look at. Recurring revenue has got to be something that's very important in a business.
Yeah, recurring revenue, membership, subscriptions. The part of recurring revenue, so recurring revenue is good because you don't start every month with a blank sheet of paper. Let's go out and find some more customers. And then at the end of the month, it's like, right, okay, let's go out and find some more customers. That's hard work. So recurring revenue means that you've got contracted revenue. And the part of recurring revenue that people forget are contracts. So you could have a 3-year contract to provide services to that company, a 5-year contract with that business. And those contracts are the equivalent of recurring revenue because you know that you've got the income for the next 5 years, 10 years, or whatever the contract term might be. So that is obviously advantageous. I mean, like in steel fabrication, you're going to have contracts to produce things because you've got tooling and you've got kit and you've got to get your supply chain working, and no one turns up and says, right, I want these things made out of steel this month, and that's it. There's an ongoing production.
Yeah.
So that there is a great benefit in there. And I think that if you start ticking those boxes for the perfect business, it doesn't guarantee success, because nothing can guarantee success, but it stacks the cards in your favor. Rather than buying a business that has unpredictable incomes and revenues, maybe losing money, doesn't have a management team, you're going to walk in the first day and have to run it. Who wants a business like that? And there are plenty of those businesses available to buy, but I don't want people to buy those bad businesses.
Yeah, that was an interesting point about stressed and distressed businesses, and just because you can, a lot of these businesses you may be able to get for nothing, really. People just say, here's the keys,
yeah,
I'm out of here, I'm gone. But just because you can doesn't necessarily mean you should.
It's funny, I was actually sitting with a couple of years ago, that exact same conversation with the owner of a very successful turnaround, private equity turnaround business. They've been going for years, very, very successful. And I knew the owner from another situation. And I was in his office and we were just chatting, and he said, Jonathan, just because I can buy the business for nothing doesn't mean that I should. Exactly your words, Andrew. Exactly your words. And they're experts at turning businesses around. There is this fallacy that you buy a business for £1 or buy a business for $1. You do some things in the business that are very, very easy, and then the business suddenly is incredibly profitable, and then you can sell it for a small fortune. Okay. The chances of you being successful doing that are practically zero. I mean, if you think about it, you've got a guy who's owned the business for 10 years, and the business has gotten a spot of bother. He can't make it work. He sells it to you for £1 because he wants you to take over all the liabilities. He can walk away, hands clean, go and have a holiday and get rid of the stress. You've now got all the stress.
Yeah.
And you can bet your bottom dollar, you can bet your bottom $1 that the problems that he's told you are the tip of the iceberg. There will be 1,000 others. Some people even say, don't even need to do due diligence on that business, because look, you're buying it for nothing. Do the diligence after you've bought the business. What?
Yeah.
What? Yeah. Every time I bought a business and thought, oh, not quite what I expected, was when I did a quick diligence exercise. When I cut corners on the diligence. You don't cut corners on due diligence. You just don't do it. And you don't want to be taking over someone else's problem. Now, I've done it and I've been successful. I bought a group of digital marketing businesses off its private equity owner, unloved asset in their portfolio, for £1. Well, there were 7 companies, so it was £1 each, so £7. And I did implement a turnaround across an 11-month period and sold it 11 months after buying it. And I bought it for £7. I sold it for £1.3 million, and that's cash, real money, 1.3 million in 11 months. But it was a pretty stressful 11 months. And I don't think I really want to do it again. Now, I have done it again since, but not as successfully, to be fair. So it's hard work. Why do that when you can buy a business that's already making money? You don't need to use your own money to buy it. We can fund the acquisition. We can finance it 100%. And the business makes money from day one. That's the sort of business you want to be owning, a business that makes money, not a business that is firefighting. I mean, the business that I bought for £1 off the private equity guys, very established and successful private equity firm. And this just wasn't their wheelhouse. They just let this business languish in a portfolio. I had to make about 70 people redundant to save the business. I had to put it through a pre-pack administration to get rid of all the HMRC debt and the tax avoidance schemes that were in this business. Right. So I had to really clean it up, and it was full on. I dreamt about it. Would I want to do that now in my 50s? I'm not sure if I would.
unless it's an ego thing and to prove that you can do it. But
I
you know,
think
you
it
don't
is
want to
an ego thing.
make yourself ill doing it, do you? God's
Yeah,
sake.
it is an ego thing. Buy a business for nothing, turn it into a success story. Well, yeah, you're the hero, right? But we're not doing this to be heroes. We're doing this to create positive cash flow that can pay off our mortgage, put the kids through school, university, buy the holiday home, and have a nice lifestyle. That is ego. That's why we do it.
Yeah, well, only here once, so have a good crack at it. But there's ways to do it without risking your health.
Oh, absolutely. You have to realize that business is just a business. It's there to serve you. You are not there to serve it.
Absolutely. And I think we're running out of time now. So if anybody has felt inspired and wants to know more, where can they find you, Jonathan?
YouTube. So I've got a very active YouTube channel, post 2 new videos every single week. I think it's about 200 videos on there now, all about buying a business, dozens and dozens and dozens of interviews with people who've been there and done it. So I think you'll find those very inspiring. And connect with me on LinkedIn. Find me on LinkedIn, Jonathan J on LinkedIn. I'm sure there's a few Jonathan J's, but find someone who looks like me on LinkedIn. And you know, I'm a regular LinkedIn poster as well. So just come and say hello.
Fantastic, and I'll put the links in the blurb for the podcast as well, because yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. We've run out of time, and I could have easily filled another hour, but maybe we'll get back
another time, perhaps
another time, and maybe when I've got 1 or 2 over the line myself.
Absolutely, yeah, very different conversation then.
Yeah, brilliant. Jonathan J, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for your time, mate.
Thank you.